Thomas Edison, Richard Branson, John F. Kennedy, Mozart, Michael Jordan, Will Smith. That sounds like a list of highly successful titans in a variety of vocations. Why is it that we rarely hear that they have or had ADHD? And you know what we hear even less about? Serena Williams, Emma Watson, Mel Robbins, Whoopi Goldberg, Agatha Christie, Erin Brockovich, Cher. Yeah, the successful women navigating ADHD. And that's exactly why I started this podcast, ADHD for Smartass Women. I'm your host, Tracy Otsuka. I'm a lawyer, not a doctor, a lifelong student, now a coach. I'm also the creator of Your ADHD Brain is A-OK, a system that helps people like you figure out what they should do with their life. And we're here today to talk ADHD, your strengths, your symptoms, your workarounds, and how you proudly stand out instead of trying to fit in. I credit my ADHD for some of my greatest gifts. And you know what? I spy a happier life for you too. So without further ado, a shiny new episode is starting now. Hello, I am Tracy Otsuka, and I wanted to welcome you to episode 83 of ADHD for Smartass Women. I am in the middle of working through my patented system, Your ADHD Brain is A-OK, with 105 of the most incredible women on the face of this earth, truly. This is the strength-focused, supportive, brilliant group of women that I've always dreamed of. And I think what I love the most is the sense of community and deep understanding that they have not only for each other, but honestly, I have for them. You know, they have confirmed for me everything that I have believed to be true about ADHD women. And the thing that's bowled me over the most is their need to live to their potential and to make a huge difference. You know, I've always questioned myself. Like, why can't I be like my friend Susan or Stephanie or Ellery? And those aren't real names, by the way. And just be happy with a well-paying job and a nice house and a great husband and a good family. And I don't know, a great vacation at least once every year. You know, why did I constantly feel this push, or why do I constantly feel this push to explore what living to my full potential means? And why did this desire in me get louder and louder the older that I got? You know, why can't I just ride off into the sunset and retire and kick back and relax? Now, don't get me wrong. I look at Susan and Stephanie and Ellery and I do ask why, but I just want to know why. I don't want to actually do that. So A-OK made me realize that no, I'm not a freak of nature. These women are my people. They feel the same way that I do. You know, they're asking why too. So on a lark yesterday, I decided to post a poll into our big group, ADHD for Smartass Women, because my gut told me that this desire to live to your full potential and to make a difference in the world, my gut told me that that's an ADHD trait. So this is the question that I posted. Do you feel as if you have a stronger desire to make a difference in the world and live to your potential than your non-ADHD peers? Now, I want you to keep in mind that there are 12,000 members in our ADHD for Smartass Women Facebook group. So this is a relatively small sampling, but the response was still so amazingly eye-opening to me. And this is the response that I got. 177 women said yes. 15 said no. 11 said yes, but then I forgot. And 4 said yes, but they didn't have the tools or the energy to know how to do it. So in essence, 192 women said yes. They did feel as if they had a stronger desire to make a difference in the world and live to their potential than their non-ADHD peers. and 15 said no. I believe that the need to make a difference in the world and live to your full potential is an ADHD trait. So there are also a couple of questions that have come up in AOK, and they're questions that I see a lot, even though I do have a few podcasts on the subject. But it's been a while since I've talked about them all together, and I've definitely become so much clearer on what works for me and what doesn't. So I just feel like I want to have another conversation today around productivity, procrastination, and this inability that we often have to just start something, right? To just get our things done. And the thing is that sometimes we struggle to start things that we don't want to do, but often we even struggle to start doing things that we really want to do and that we enjoy doing. I think you writers out there and probably you artists can relate to that comment. We can struggle to do hard things, but we can also struggle to do easy things that we have an interest in doing, that we enjoy doing. So I have a personal example. I think the hardest thing that I've ever had to do was to create the AOK system. The AOK system, if you don't already know, was built from my patented cartography system. I created cartography, 5 years ago, and I have been working with it ever since. It's my, what do I do with my life program, basically. And it took me about 4 to 5 months to create my first pass of cartography. Since then, I've refined it into 2 or 3 updated versions over, the last couple of years. Now, believe it or not, it took me 14 months to create Your ADHD Brain is A-OK. Why in the world would it be that much harder for me to create A-OK than it would be for me to create cartography, which is what the AOK system was built off of? Because I was bored out of my gourd. The creativity that it took for me to create and build cartography, it wasn't really there anymore, right? All I did for AOK was to update cartography so that it took into account the ADHD brain. Sure, there were some parts that did require creativity that were a lot of fun. I added an entire new section on strengths, and I got to create trainings on how the ADHD brain works, which I loved. But for the most part, it was a lot of painstaking administrative detail, something that I am so not good at, and I actually detest. Things like creating new slides, re-recording new, shorter videos, updating worksheets to make them simpler and cleaner, editing copy. Oh my God, I totally hate doing that. I don't know what my problem is, but I can edit everybody else's copy, right? I see things all the time and I'm thinking, did you read this before you sent it out? But for me to sit down and to focus on each line, to use a well-worn cliche, it is like pulling teeth. I don't even know what that means. What does pulling teeth mean? And then what I had to do is put all this together into a new workbook. The whole experience was truly awful. And the only thing that kept me going was I knew how much this could help ADHD women. And I knew that there was nothing currently out there like it. I knew that I had created what I couldn't find, and I knew you all needed it. So I would literally write on my to-do list, like, how many videos am I going to record, or how many chapters am I going to get through, on the workbook? How many worksheets was I going to do like every day? And it just wouldn't happen. And finally, and this actually worked, I started to hire people that could do the little bits and pieces for me. So I hired a video editor, and I hired someone to put the workbook together, and I hired someone to put the new worksheets together and make them fillable. But oftentimes I'd hire the wrong people, and then it became just a bigger nightmare than had I done it myself. Even so, over time, and it took me a long time, I finally discovered that if I could hire the right people, if I could hire good people who would give me deadlines, then it would work. So the big joke is whenever I hire a VA, it's not really a joke. It's just how I now work. I always ask them, can you manage up? Meaning, can you manage me? can you give me deadlines that I need to meet? Because what I'm basically doing is I'm setting myself up to be accountable to someone else. Because again, I may disappoint myself, but if I promise you something, I will move hell and high water to make it happen. And that will happen, especially if it's someone new that I'm working with that I completely respect. I digress. Anyway, but that was an example of something that really should have been relatively easy for me to get done. But it took me 14 months of my life. And there truly wasn't a day in those 14 months that I wasn't beating myself up, or at least perpetually asking myself, why is this so damn hard for me to get through? What definitely helped and made me feel more in control and kind of, righted the ship and made me move in the right direction was when I moved everything over from all these individual platforms that I was on to an application called Kajabi, which is the platform that now houses my website, my landing pages, my email list, my cartography system, and of course also my AOK system. And I think it was because I could actually use Kajabi myself. It was very intuitive to my linear brain. And that meant I didn't have to wait for a designer. I didn't have to wait for my assistant. I didn't have to wait for a programmer to fix something for me before I could do what I needed to do, And so Kajabi was definitely a game changer for me. And I can't recommend it highly enough if you have any kind of online business. And I'll post the link to the show notes. I literally rave about Kajabi to anyone who will listen. So, you get it too. But again, I'm digressing. So this was just an example of something that I had an extreme interest in getting done, right? Getting my AOK system completed. And any neurotypical brained human would think that, well, if it took 4 or 5 months for you to build cartography 5 years ago, that was like the beginning part of it. And you've been working it every day since then. And you've rebuilt it 2 more times or 3 more times since then. And all you're going to do now is just take cartography and rebuild it for the ADHD brain and actually make it simpler, clearer. The videos are going to be shorter, right? It shouldn't take you more than a few months to build it, right? No. So this podcast on procrastination, productivity, and when we just can't start came about through this discussion between 2 of our AOKers, 2 of the women that I'm working with right now, who are trying to figure out the corresponding strength to procrastination. So I have this theory that for every single one of our weaknesses, we have a corresponding strength. And so Esther, one of our AOKers, a wonderful AOKer, said, what could possibly be the strength side of procrastination? What could possibly be good about it? And that led to a conversation about procrastination. What is it and why do we do it? And I will talk about the strength at the very end, or the strength side of procrastination. So procrastination has nothing to do with time management. It has nothing to do with being lazy or being disorganized. It is all about emotional dysregulation. In short, we are talking about negative emotion here. We just feel things more, and we have less of an ability to self-regulate. We can have the best intentions, but we can struggle to actually act. We know what we need to do, right? Often we just can't get ourselves to do it. It's not that we won't do it. It's that we literally cannot do it. We feel like we are moving a huge boulder up a mountain. Now, of course, everyone procrastinates, right? Everyone at one time or another struggles to get something done, and they don't want to do it. But the difference between them and us is that they actually can do it. And I've seen studies that indicate that the ADHD brain can actually experience physical and mental pain around getting certain things done. So how in the world do we combat this? And I want to tell you that over time, I have learned what works for me and what doesn't. And there is definitely a way that I now can deal with all of this. And it is so much easier. So this is all learnable. But like everything ADHD, it's all about positive emotion. And like anything ADHD, it is also really about understanding who you are and how you best work, how your brain best works. So please know that just because these things work for me that does not mean that they will all work for you. And I'll admit too that some of these things work better for me than other things. Over time though, I have just learned what works best for me. So I want you to try some of these things out and I want you to see what works best for you. Okay, number one, start with little hits of dopamine to ramp up to the big stuff. Look, deadlines provide big hits of dopamine, right? You are so full of fear because what if you don't get it done and you're just, flying in under the deadline? Adrenaline is going through the roof. But the thing about fear is it doesn't really feel good. And it certainly isn't a healthy way of dealing with procrastination on an ongoing basis. So I start with small things first. I've tried all the online planner to-do apps. They don't work for me. What I do now is I use a weekly planner that's one page and printed on cardstock. I got the one-page weekly print on cardstock idea from Francesca Rizzo, and then I refined it to work for me. So on my to-do list, I have 3 medium-sized things that I need to get done each day, no more than that. And notice that there are no big things on my list. I break everything down into small chunks because guess what? I know the more things that I can check off my to-do list, the more positive emotion I create. And this is what motivates me to keep going. So when I wake up in the morning and I sit down at my desk, I start with little hits of dopamine. So how do I do that? So between 8:30 and 10:45 a.m. in the morning, I know that I am going to be crossing off these super simple, easy little things off my checklist first. Each one I check off, I get a hit of dopamine. So by the time 11 a.m. rolls around, I've had enough dopamine hits to get me to tackle that first medium thing. Because remember, I want a bunch of different things to check off. And so I break it all down. So instead of putting on my to-do list, create podcast number 83, I will break it down into researching podcast number 83, outlining podcast number 83, editing podcast number 83, recording podcast number 83, creating the show notes for podcast 83. So I will break it down into all those steps. And I never do all those steps in one day. I'll do a couple of the big things. Like the big thing for me is researching and also creating the outline of a podcast. And so I won't have more than that and maybe one other, more medium-sized activity on my to-do list in one day. Now, if I'm lucky enough that I can blow through, because sometimes we have days like that, right? So if I'm lucky enough that I can blow through that and more on one day, great. But I'm not going to set myself up to fail. I'm going to set myself up to have little dopamine hits throughout my day. Okay, what else do I do? Whenever I can, I make things fun. Why? Because fun generates positive emotion for us. Positive emotion increases dopamine and thereby increases our motivation. Now, what is fun is different for all of us. So you need to ask yourself, what can you do to feel better about what needs to get done? For me, a change in scenery is huge. And I know with COVID, it's been a big struggle because there are no coffee shops that I can go work in, right? But what I will do is I will say, okay, you don't have to sit at your desk anymore. You can go sit out in the garden and you can do work. If I'm in a rut and I'm stuck, that will make a difference. You can work with a body double or a friend. Now, of course, we're not working with body doubles today, but my daughter is home studying for the LSAT. And so I will say to her, how about working in the garden with me? I'm stuck. And she'll come often and ask the same thing. Since we're in COVID and you can't really have a real live body double, try FocusMate. You can find out about it in our group. How else could you make things fun? Well, you could give yourself a challenge. If I get through item X within the next half an hour, I'm going to get to take a 10-minute break. I'm going to go make myself a cup of coffee. And my thing again is always the garden. I will go outside and I will sit in the garden. What else can you do to increase your productivity? Well, take the thought out of it. Do whatever you can to get all the thoughts about what you need to do out of your head. Ask yourself, how can I make things more automatic? How can I take the emotion away and replace it with action so that you don't even get to sit there and think about all the stuff that you need to do? You just need to get in your chair and start acting. Couple things. I like to schedule meetings for 9 a.m. This gives me enough time to check one or more things off my easy list and make sure that I'm not dilly-dallying to get to my desk. If I have a meeting at 9 a.m., I need to get moving right away on my easy list, right? Now, you may not be a morning person, but of course, there are all different ways to build an accountability. Your scheduled meeting, it doesn't have to be at 9 a.m. in the morning if you tend to work late into the evening. But just getting that first meeting to make sure that I'm at my desk at a certain time, because I don't like to go into a meeting without having looked at my to-do list and crossed, one or two things off of it. So that really helps me to get started. One of my challenges when I'm in my head and I can't start is to just flip my 25-minute Datex cube on its head. And I'll have the link to the show notes. It's basically kind of like a Pomodoro, right? It's the Pomodoro method where you work for 25 minutes and then you stop for 5. But once I start working for 25 minutes, I never stop. But I have a deal with myself. Okay, so I've got my Datex cube in my hand right now. I flip it on its end. It beeps. And then I don't know if you can hear it ticking. And then it ticks. And it goes down 24:55, 24:53, 24:52, just like that. And so what I will do is I will have a deal with myself. Look, after that first 25 minutes, you can quit. I have never to this day quit. I just need the help getting started. And this gets me out of my head and it gets me into action. I can't think about it. I don't allow myself to think about it. I just have a deal. All you have to do, Tracy, is 25 minutes. That's all you have to do. And I just stop thinking, I act, I flip the cube on its end, and I start. And I'm telling you, it never fails. Now, I also know that my brain is sharpest in the morning for podcasts. So I only book podcast guests in the morning. And I let them book their own podcast appointments. Again, I am taking the thought out of it. I'm taking all those little details that I need to do that I struggle to do away from me. I have certain dates and times set up on my Calendly app, and then I just take myself out of the equation. All the back and forth is going to mean that if left to my own devices, it will never get done. It's hard enough for me to just respond to their emails, right? Which leads me to template things whenever you can. So that's number 3. I have an email template that I use for podcast guests. Calendly then allows me to send all the information that the guests would need to know about how to prepare for the podcast, what equipment they need to make available, how if they're having problems with the sound, that they can put a big old towel